Checking. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Anybody remember Sobe tea? That was like the whole thing, like the late 90s. Everybody loved that, and you don't see that around anymore. Wonder what happened to them. I won't investigate that any further. Anyway, let's get it going for today. Hope everybody's enjoying their summertime. Dwight here, and we're going to do a little throwback to a Dwight's Bites. We're going to do a little Dwight's Bites episode this week, because there's a few items of business I think we want to take a look at that have come across my desk over the last week or two, and a little bit of history, which I think everyone would find very interesting. Hint, there may be some redacteds in there later on. Anyway, why don't we get started to something that was brought to my attention by our good friend of the show, at Insane Mistress. And it's also a little bit of an update on the Blackstone Group, which we have done an episode on, if you'll remember that, our friends and sponsors at the Blackstone Group. You know, we've been talking about over the last a few months, as we've been seeing in this insane rise of real estate prices across the country, a consolidation of housing, a commodification of housing into the hands of an increasingly few people. Not only that, but we're also seeing that, I think it was in one of the episodes we were talking about, it was like 1 in 5 single family homes purchased in the last, let's say, I think it was like in 2021, were purchased by people that won't even live in them, were purchased by investors. And Blackstone here is, has been chumming the water and been exhibiting exactly the same disgusting, commodifying, predatory behavior as a lot of other private equity firms. So Insane Mistress sent me here an article from the San Diego Union Tribune. And the title of it is, and this is from May 11th, in fact, Blackstone Group to buy 66 apartment complexes in San Diego for more than $1 billion. Private equity group Blackstone Group plans to purchase 66 residential complexes in the San Diego County for more than $1 billion in one of the biggest real estate transactions in local history. New York-based Blackstone... I'm sorry if I'm tripping up on my words, because this guy, the fucking ham radio operator, is still talking in my ear. And I just sat down at my desk and I'm like, please, let me just do the episode. I'm like, there's no way I'm recording this at 2:30 in the afternoon on a Friday. I'm like, there's no way that he's like talking to somebody in fucking Ohio right now, but here he is. Calling downtown. Oh, very weird. Anyway, go back to Blackstone here. New York-based Blackstone is purchasing roughly 5,800 apartment units from the Conrad Prebys Foundation. It intends to spend $100 million to improve the new assets. God, somewhere to live. It just seems so insane that, like, for 5,800 families, let's just say, whatever, that, 5,800 units, that where they fucking live is listed as an asset on some prick's balance sheet in Midtown Manhattan. It's just insane to me. It says, the sale of the apartments was praised by Dan Yates, the president of the Conrad Prebys Foundation, who said the portfolio was assembled by Conrad Prebys, a San Diego developer himself. Yates said that the money from the deal will be used for grants, primarily in San Diego. Isn't that lovely? Hey, this is actually going to be good because, this is what we do as a foundation, is hold people's homes hostage. It says here, I love this. Yates wrote in an email, Conrad Prebys was a sharp businessman who found true joy in the act of giving, and I believe he would be honored to see the result of his life's work dedicated to continuing his philanthropic legacy. Hey, you know who loves giving? Developers. Jesus Christ. The deal will bring Blackstone's apartment total in San Diego County to 6,700 units, making it among the top 3 biggest landlords. San Diego R&V Management holds about 8,000 apartments and is the largest landlord. Again, the fact that, that's insane to me. That, the whole point, supposedly, the American dream is for you to have, 2 kids in a house, right? With a white picket fence or whatever. The fucking, white flight suburban fantasy that has been sold to us since, the beginning of the post-World War II economic boom. It doesn't exist, obviously. And it furthermore will never exist because of the predatory nature of these fucking vulture capital firms. I love this line, too. It says, the global co-head of Blackstone Real Estate, Kathleen McCarthy, wrote in an email, Blackstone has long been a believer in San Diego. What the fuck does that even mean? What does it even mean? Jesus Christ. Yeah, I just, there was another thing that really just struck me, and I'm gonna take a detour from today's show because I had everything listed out as a listed out as a bullet point here to present for the show today. But I'm just reminding something that also I saw recently, which fucking blows my mind. Okay, so this is as of today. This is Friday, July 30th. This is a Washington Post article that says evictions are about to restart as tenants wait on billions in unspent rental aid. Now, hang on. That's a bit of a dense sentence. So there's two parts to this here, right? Evictions are about to restart. Why? Because, there was a moratorium put on evictions by the government. Okay, so that's one thing. That's about to end at the end of this month, which is July 31st. Now, that's the first part of it. The second part of it here is tenants wait on billions in unspent rental aid. What? What does that mean? I'll tell you what it means. Let's read on into the article. It starts out with a little allegory here. When the pandemic hit, Angela Bears was afraid that she would bring the virus home to her 3-year-old son, who was in treatment for kidney cancer. She fell behind on rent in her in Kansas City, Missouri home when she decided it was safer to stop going to her warehouse job. Bears said she applied for rental assistance multiple times this spring, but never heard back. Without any government aid, she's now $5,000 behind on her rent and fearing eviction. She's asking for donations online to stay in her home. I've got boxes. I've started packing, Bears said. The only thing at this point that matters to me is my son doesn't get sick. Fuck. Bears is one of thousands of Americans who have been shortchanged by a yawning disconnect between two well-meaning policies lawmakers passed in response to the pandemic. It's not, if it doesn't work, it's not a good policy. Well-meaning just means bad policy if it's not doing anything. One, a federal ban on some evictions is set to expire Saturday. Another, a $46.5 billion emergency fund aimed on getting rent to tenants at risk of eviction has been slowly painful to get off the ground, with some states and counties unable to spend even $1 of the money they were provided months earlier. What the fuck? And for the record, too, that's so fucking insane. That it's not, because think about that. The legislation could have read, hey, landlords, an asset like you have, an investment property like you own, should have carry the same risk as any other investment vehicle, right? Sometimes you're not going to make money. Some years, some months, some weeks, you're not going to make money. If you're doing this as an investment, you assume some risk. But the fucking neoliberals that control the government did not say that. They said, no, we're just going to give you the money, landlords. We're just going to give you the money. So they're taking our tax dollars to subsidize and say, actually, we do think that this should be a guaranteed investment for you. Go fuck yourself. The expiration of the federal moratorium, following a last-ditch effort by congressional Democrats to revive it that is expected to fail, will leave renters with few pandemic-era protections as courts begin processing steep backlogs of eviction cases. Only 9 states and D.C. have some kind of emergency protections for tenants that will last into August, according to analysis by the Washington Post. This has magnified criticism of the sluggish emergency rental assistance program, which some advocates say was flawed from the get-go because it relies on state and local governments across the country to create and administer their own programs. Just fucking give us money, Jesus Christ. Just give us fucking money and tell the landlords to go fuck themselves. I'm giving the finger to my wall here. I don't know, but at least I hope it comes through. While some states quickly set up programs, others struggled to locate people in need or else receive so many applications that the onslaught of overwhelmed staff and software systems caused months-long delays. I'm so fucking mad. Long story short, as of June 30th, only 3 of the $25 billion have been actually given as emergency rental assistance. It's just 12%. And I also have to imagine, too, and I'm just reading into this, and I'm thinking about this now, there are a huge amount of tenants that have undocumented status in the United States. And they would be, for very fucking good reason, I would imagine, reticent to go and, put their names on the books and locate themselves to the government and say, here's where I am, I need help. And I would imagine that there's, I'm just, this is pretty bad. This is pretty bad. Sorry, I'm tripped up because the guy's fucking still talking. I'm like, God damn. I don't know what do I do about this? So I'm just skipping ahead to another portion of this where we just hear another allegory of a poor person that's just suffering here. It says under the section called Moratorium Under Assault. Timothy Johnson, a 59-year-old with a chronic hip problem and 2 young daughters, says his landlord is waiting on $11,000 in unpaid rent for his rent-controlled Bronx apartment. He receives disability payments, and his wife has had a job as a department store clerk, but he said it's not been enough to cover the rent, obviously. He said he avoids thinking about what would happen if New York State can't ultimately provide him and his wife with funds to make up their thousands of dollars in unpaid rent. If that happens, I'm going to trust in God because he's going to make a way, he said. He always has made a way. That's when your faith kicks in. And this is what's really fucking insane. New York has been one of the slowest states to start its aid program. Governor Andrew Cuomo said to Tuesday that the state finally began making payments in July and that the state would relax documentation requirements, streamline the application process, and convene staffers from other state agencies to process applications. Can you imagine having the governor that takes the most money from developers in the entire country is, you trust him to start, to start making sure that you don't get evicted? Oh, buddy, we're in fucking trouble here. So I don't want to, we need to move on in interest of time, but just like you think about that with the first article that we were reading, about how private equity companies are increasing their market share as landlords in the United States and are are poised to evict people that can't pay what they're charging. And the government, which is supposedly, and this is a theme that we're going to tie into a little bit later, the government that's supposedly supposed to be in charge of you not getting thrown out on your fucking ass is failing. And again, this is the good guys in charge right now. Yikes. Let's move on because we gotta, come on, I only have so much. This was just interesting. You may have recalled that we did a episode on the enormous metals and mining conglomerate Rio Tinto. And you may remember their, let's just say, shady history of exploitation. Some say slavery. I say slavery. This was just interesting that this was an article that came out only 2 days ago. And I just found this to be fucking staggering. Rio Tinto logged a record first half performance on Wednesday, meaning, their profits from the first half of this year. On Wednesday, underpinned by soaring iron ore prices on strong demand from China, which led the global miner to pay out a bonanza of $9.1 billion in dividends. For those of you that aren't stockholders like myself, and I have my massive portfolio. I'm just kidding. I don't know. Fuck all. I tell this story occasionally. I owned like 2 Bitcoin when it was like, I can't remember what it was. I think it was like $40 each or something. And this would have been maybe in like 2011, 2012. I can't recall at this point. And now, what is Bitcoin now? Is this going to hurt me if I look this up? Convert 1 BTC to USD. So if I had 2, it would be double whatever. Oh boy. Yeah, it'd be like $80,000 now. Well, Dwight, I guess you got to keep working. Okay, so $9.1 billion in dividends. Dividends meaning you're a shareholder and you get to share in our profit, right? It's just insane to me that $9.1 billion in one half of a year's profits is going to go to shareholders. And again, shareholders, I believe Professor Richard Wolff says 20% of shareholders in, let's say, the New York Stock Exchange own 80% of the stocks, meaning you don't own it. You don't own the economy. It's the firms that hold the equities that get these dividends. And all of the people that are providing those profits, all of the quote artisanal mining, all of the exploitation, all of the neo-feudalism that these companies engage in, all of the indentured servitude that these countries engage in, where they're the sole employer in a region and they get to set how much money you get, and you certainly aren't a fucking shareholder, trust me. None of that goes to the actual people. None of the recompense, none of the windfall actually goes to the people that provide the value. It's just these investors, just these faceless people, just these family offices, foundations and shit like that just are killing it just by having money. Really, really troubling. Anyway, if you haven't listened to that Rio Tinto episode, I highly recommend that you do. Again, Oh, Dwight, you're so fucking passionate about like mining metals and shipping and shit like that. Yeah. Well, that's a lot of the way that the global economy runs. And a lot of this shit is shady as fuck. So of course we have to pay attention to it. Anyway, we move on now to, I think, something that is okay. We're gonna do this in like a little a different direction. Let's start this over. The Delta variant is on the rise in the United States. And one of the shocking things that happened recently was this outbreak out of Provincetown, Massachusetts. And it prompted the CDC to say, hey, we got to fucking think about what's going on here and the effectiveness of the vaccines against this Delta variant. Because, of course, as we've talked about a lot, the federal government has completely fucking bungled the response to this, to the Delta variant. And I mean this not just the Trump administration, but also the Biden administration. And what's crazy, just as a quick tangent as well, the thing that really fucking bothers me is you see like neoliberals talking about like believe science, trust science. But did you get your Fauci ouchie yet? I can't even say it, man. I can't say it. And the point is like, oh, these stupid people, they're just going to die because they don't believe in science and they just believe in Donald Trump and Donald Trump is the problem. And these people are just like, well, they'll just die then because they're stupid. And trust me, there's a lot of people that are fucking stupid. But the disingenuousness of that statement is that if we truly wanted to believe science, then we would have employed social science and said, how can we reach an increasing amount of people instead of just scolding them for not getting the vaccine? Are we going to create a federal guarantee to take time off after your vaccine, or wages that you would lose because they're afraid of people that are afraid of getting, a bad reaction to the vaccine? I was put on my fucking ass when I got my second dose, man. I mean, I was cooked for like 2 days. I mean, I would do it again in a heartbeat. And if we have an opportunity to take a third booster, I will jump on that fucking syringe. But it took me out. It took me out. And if you are dependent on, if you have the weight of, let's just say that other guy in the fucking Bronx, of $11,000 in owed money to your landlord, like, do you think you can take fucking time off to deal with the effects of the vaccine? Fuck. So I'm gonna build up to that, but the point is that what was striking to me, and this was updated today, in fact, only just a few minutes ago, about the outbreak in Massachusetts, up in Cape Cod and Provincetown, where there was a COVID-19 outbreak. 3/4 of the people infected were vaccinated. That's a little spooky, you might say. And what's even more shocking is I'm just like reading through this Washington Post article. It said, critically, the study found that vaccinated individuals carried as much virus in their noses as unvaccinated individuals, and that vaccinated people could spread the virus to each other. The CDC was criticized this week for changing its mask guidance without citing unpublished data. This report released Friday contains that data. But of course, what it says is, maybe we should have made sure that we kept our masks on. I mean, there's a trillion different intricacies with this. But the underlying point of the United States' response to this is to maintain profits for those that own the economy. Now, I want to switch to something that I thought was very interesting. And this was just an example of a farther trend that we're seeing right now. I'm reading here from the Today Show. This came out yesterday, July 29th. Danny Meyer's restaurants will require COVID-19 vaccinations for diners and staff. Meyer, the founder of Shake Shack and chairman of the Fast Casual's board, said that the company will set its own policy regarding vaccines. And I'll just read a little bit here. It says, Danny Meyer's Union Square Hospitality Group will require indoor diners and drinkers at its restaurants to show they've been vaccinated against COVID-19. The mandate also applies to current employees and new hires. This is the most logical thing I've ever seen, Meyer said. I'm not a scientist, but I know how to read data, and what I see is that this is a crisis of people who have not been vaccinated, and I feel a strong responsibility on our part as business leaders to take care of our team and our guests, and that's what we're doing. Now, if I'm reading into this, and I want to know what you guys think, what I'm reading into this is, we're seeing, just in New York State alone, the instances of positive COVID-19 tests has gone up 533% month over month. I think I looked at that data. It was July 28th over June 28th, 533%. And people say, oh, well, it's a big state, there's millions of people in it, and blah, 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 blah. Yeah, of course, that's true. But that's still an average of, and I'm looking as of yesterday, 1,050 people infected just that day. And of course, if we look at the increased transmission rate of the Delta variant, well, that fucking makes ripples, right? And we could start to see the increase in this sort of thing in a fucking hurry. And I'm sorry, that number was just for New York City. So it gets fucking spooky, right? But what I think is happening is I read this as saying, we as business leaders see a problem in the way that the government is responding to this. And we took a big fucking hit last year, and the business community as a whole took a big hit, and stock prices went way down. Our portfolios went to shit. Of course, the government stepped in and we were able to, come back from that. But if that happens again, I don't know if we're going to be able to fire as many people this time and then rehire them for even a lower wage. It's kind of like, I can only do this trick once sort of thing. That wasn't Jordan Peterson. That was Marvin the Martian. The point is that business leaders, I think, and this is an example, are stepping up. And I'm not saying that they should be the ones that do this, but I see them saying like, hey, it's in our mutual interest to get our shit together and try to slow this thing by forcing people to vaccinate. Because think about it this way. Capitalists own the economy, right? And what they're saying is if you want to participate in the economy that we own, then this is the barrier to entry you have to cross. You have to get your vaccine. And it probably will force people to do it. In fact, I want to read from a tweet from Will Sommer that he did the other day, which was very interesting. He said, I'm reading a lot of anti-COVID vaccine forums, and it's striking how quickly the posters fold and get the vaccine as soon as it's mandated by their jobs, colleges, or governments. The other posters tell them to go off the grid and live in the woods, but not a lot of takers on that idea. Yeah, of course not. We all have to participate in this larger economy, like it or not. And so when it comes to, affecting your material conditions to say like, hey, I don't know, I got to get to work. And if my work says that fucking, I got to get the vaccine. Well, I don't really have much of a choice. Otherwise, I'm just going to be cast off into the fucking, the reserve army of labor. So I thought that was a very interesting kind of, business leaders kind of trying to take this into their own hands. And they can. Because they own the economy and they pay for the politicians that run the government. So of course they could do something like this. Now, interestingly, and this should have been happening from the fucking get-go, is President Biden wants $100 payments for every newly vaccinated American. And it says here, President Biden is calling on state, territorial, and local governments to provide $100 payments to incentivize Americans to receive the coronavirus vaccine. Today the president... Oh, I guess this isn't him. No, I'll do it. I'll do it as him anyway. Today the president is calling on state, territorial, and local governments to provide $100 payments for every newly vaccinated American. I'm gonna do it like the sleepy, a serious Biden. It's an extra incentive. Gotta boost the vaccination rates. Gotta protect the communities. Save lives. And it said here, the Treasury stands ready to give technical assistance to state and local governments so that they may use funds effectively to support increased vaccination in their communities. Now, straight up, paying people to get the vaccine is a good idea. Paying people to get the vaccine is a good idea. You have to. First off, the way I fucking see it is that they owe us fucking money, right? They owe us at least $1,400. Fucking $600 payment and all this. It's bullshit. Like, the fact that they left us to fucking die, like, without giving a shit is insane to me. So, of course, it's important for them to fucking give us some money. What I don't see here is, sorry, scratch that, because I'm going to say something else. The first and probably only time I'll ever retweet our good friend of the show, John Delaney, was he had a tweet that said, the best time to provide financial incentives for people to get vaccinated was 6 months ago. The second best time is today. And it's true. It's true. People should be paid to get the vaccine. Yeah, there's a bunch of people. I mean, fucking, I've had people in my fucking mentions that were like, well, if you have to pay me to get it, then, I should be even more concerned of what's in it. Yeah, we should be fucking concerned of what's in it. But also, like, I want to live. And I don't want to infect my family. And paying people to get it is the best incentive. Putting money directly in people's fucking pockets is the way to go. What I do not see here from the president is a program to do that. This is just him saying it out loud. Now, Bill de Blasio in the city of New York has said that, I don't know, I said that like fucking Jeff Goldblum. Yes. And Bill de Blasio in the city of New York is paying people to get the vaccine. That wasn't bad. $100 for people getting their first dose in the city of New York. That's a great idea. That incentivizes people to go out and get it. People could use $100. Should be $1,000, but people could use $100. So of course it's an important thing. If you marry this with what we heard earlier about from the Washington Post thing, where they're talking about, only 12% of the rent relief actually got into people's fucking bank accounts. How are they going to do this? Are they going to actually do this? They can. They straight up can, but they haven't. And now I want to refer us to another article of things that they can do, but don't. This was a stunning article that came out of the New York Times here, and I want to read a little bit of it. It says here, pandemic aid programs spur a record drop in poverty. Isn't that a fucking novel thing, huh? The most comprehensive study yet of the federal response to the pandemic shows huge but temporary benefits for the poor and helps frame a larger debate over the role of government. Shut up. Sorry. All right, we're going to go. This is from Jason DeParle. The huge increase in government aid prompted by the coronavirus pandemic will cut poverty nearly in half this year from pre-pandemic levels and push the share of Americans in poverty to the lowest level on record, according to the most comprehensive analysis yet of a vast but temporary expansion of the safety net. The number of poor Americans is expected to fall by nearly 20 million from 2018 levels, a decline of almost 45%. The country has never cut poverty so much in such a short period of time, and the development is especially notable since it defies economic headwinds. The economy has nearly 7 million fewer jobs than it did before the pandemic. Isn't it a fucking novel thing that you give people money and they're no longer poor? Oh, but I thought we had to give them education. Oh, but I thought we needed a complicated fucking tax income rebate program. Fuck off. Give us dough. The extraordinary reduction in poverty has come at an extraordinary cost, with annual spending on major programs projected to rise fourfold to more than $1 trillion. You know what's a fucking insane cost to the United States? Tax cheats, like billionaires that pay $0 fucking in income tax. That's what's fucking crazy to me. Like, even when Jen Psaki said literally the day that fucking Jeff Bezos edged in space, where he was like, this is an amazing moment. This is an exceptional moment. Hang on, let me quote it correctly. She said, "This is a moment of American exceptionalism."
This is a moment of American exceptionalism. That's how we see it. It will be the ingenuity of all of our commercial partners to help us continue advancing to the next stage of our nation's space exploration. And investments in space create jobs, can improve life here on Earth through climate monitoring and medical advancements, just to name a few.
That's the White House, and she's talking about the biggest tax cheat in American history. That's what's so fucking crazy. So to frame it in the New York Times, of course, what do we expect from the New York Times? To frame it in the New York Times to say, but at what cost are people lifted out of poverty? Fuck you. I'm giving the finger to the wall again. Yet without further expensive new measures, millions of families may find escape from the poverty brief. The three programs that cut poverty the most, stimulus checks, increased food stamps, and expanded unemployment insurance, have ended or are scheduled to end or soon revert to their pre-pandemic size. While poverty has fallen most among children, by the way, if you didn't know that children are the most impoverished cohort in the United States, fucking chew on that for a second, it has dropped among Americans who are white, black, Latino, and Asian, and among Americans of every age group and residents of every state. Isn't that amazing? What a novel fucking idea, huh? These are really large reductions in poverty. The largest short-term reductions we've seen, said Laura Wheaton of the Urban Institute. The institution's simulation model is widely used by government agencies. The New York Times requested the analysis, which expanded on an earlier projection. The finding that poverty plunged amid hard times at huge fiscal costs, shut up, comes at the moment of sharp debate about the future of the safety net. And this is fucking fascinating to watch our consent being manufactured in real time. The Biden administration has started making monthly payments to most families with children through an expansion of the child tax credit, which, by the way, you have to pay back next year. Fuck you. Democrats want to make the year-long effort permanent. Yeah, we'll see that. Which would reduce child poverty on a continuing basis by giving their families an income guarantee. Progressives said that the new numbers vindicated their contention that poverty levels reflected political choices and government programs could reduce economic need. Isn't that a fucking novel thing? This is great, too. I just got to read this. Conservatives say that the pandemic-era spending is unsustainable and would harm the poor in the long run, arguing that unconditional aid discourages work and marriage. What? Fucking what? The child tax credit offers families up to $300 per child per month, whether or not parents have jobs, which critics call a return to failed welfare policies. Why even publish that? Like New York Times, why even publish that? Oh my God! They fucking quote the Heritage Foundation. There's no doubt that by shoveling trillions of dollars to the poor, you can reduce poverty, said Robert Rector of the Heritage Foundation. But that's not efficient and it's not good for the poor because it produces social marginalization. You want policies that encourage work and marriage, not to That's what's so funny too, is that they just say, like earlier in the article, they say progressives said, and they didn't quote anybody, they didn't cite anything. They just say progressives said it was pretty good. And here they full on fucking quote, take a soundbite from the fucking Heritage Foundation. Go fuck yourself. You know what? Fuck this wall. I'll flick it off as much as I want. I just find that to be, again, I don't know if I'm doing a good job of articulating this, but it's fucking maddening to me, just like watching the mechanizations of like every problem from, just coming off of like, our scrape with neo-fascism and just plunging directly into hellscape neoliberalism is just like, it's just so maddening. It's so hard. So I'm sorry if I'm having a little bit of trouble articulating this, but at least we can be really upset by the next thing we're going to talk about. CNN article that came out today, and a content warning for anybody that has like crippling climate anxiety. It's fine, don't worry about it, but just like skip like 6 minutes or something like that. Okay, so CNN article that came out today. The amount of Greenland ice that melted on Tuesday could cover Florida in 2 inches of water. What? Greenland is experiencing its most significant melting event of the year as temperatures in the Arctic surge. The amount of ice that melted on Tuesday alone would be enough to cover the entire state of Florida in 2 inches of water. It's the third instance of extreme melting in the past decade, during which time the melting has stretched farther inland than the entire satellite era, which began in the 1970s. Greenland has lost more than 8.5 billion tons of surface mass Tuesday, and 18.4 billion tons since Sunday, according to the Denmark Meteorological Institute. While this week's total ice loss is not as similar as an event in 2019, a record melt year, that area of ice sheet that's melting is larger. It's a significant melt, Ted Scambos, a senior research scientist at the National Snow and Ice Data Center for the University of Colorado, told CNN. July 27th saw most of the eastern half of Greenland, from the northern tip all the way to the southern tip, mostly melted, which is unusual. No fucking shit. And I'm looking at a satellite image here, and it's fucking shocking. Like, that was the whole thing. Like, our entire lives, we were just like, Greenland was covered in ice. And they called it Greenland so people wouldn't go to Iceland because it doesn't have as much ice. And look at it now. Look what we did just to fucking make a few people richer. And I can't help but match this up with Nancy Pelosi. The Green Dream or whatever. Or the clip of fucking Dianne Feinstein talking to the Sunrise Movement.
Well, we're trying to promote the Green New Deal.
Well, there are reasons why I can't, because there's no way to pay for it.
Yes, there is.
That's
we have tons of money going to the military. A lot of ours is going to the military.
But we have come to a point where our Earth is dying, literally, and it is going to be a pricey and ambitious plan that is needed to deal with the magnitude of that issue. And so we're here asking you to vote yes on the resolution for the Green New Deal, because that is the only
That resolution will not pass the Senate, and you can take that back to whoever sent you here.
The point is, the neoliberal consensus will never, ever change the business model of our entire economy. That's the truth, is that Nancy Pelosi doesn't give a shit. She's 80 years old. She's rich as fuck. Joe Biden is 70, whatever, 8, 9. He's rich as fuck. None of these motherfuckers care. None of them care. I want to come to the main topic of today's program, something that was brought to me by a buddy, which I was not familiar with, and I'm going to read this in its entirety, and it shouldn't take too long. It involves redacting a police officer, and this is reading this from Hudson Valley Mag, the Hudson Valley magazine from New York State here. And there's something here that happened in the 1800s called the anti-rent wars. Now, you think of feudalism as some kind of like faraway historical, faraway historical economic system that existed with people that wore weird tunics and shit like that. But you'd be wrong. It happened here. It happened 2 centuries ago, and it happened in America. So I want to read this in its entirety. It's certainly not comprehensive, but I think it'll at least give you a snapshot of what happened here and some ideas that, frankly, I think are pretty cool. So this was written by David Levine. It was published last year this was published in 2015 to the date, July 30th. It reads as follows. On July 4th, 1776, a small but steadfast group of North American rebels banded together, vowed to fight for their freedom and independence, and led an unlikely but ultimately successful escape from the shackles of old European domination. But you know that. And for the record, I'll just editor's note here. Basically, the American Revolution against the British was like, well, if anybody's going to profit off of slave wealth, it should be us. Anyway, on July 4th, 1839, a small but steadfast group of North American rebels banded together, vowed to fight for their freedom and independence, and led an unlikely but ultimately successful escape from the shackles of old world European domination. But hang on, that's the same thing. What happened here? You didn't know that, unless that is you lived around the hill towns of western Albany County or in some other selected parts of the Hudson Valley where you may have some knowledge of the so-called anti-rent wars of the 1830s and 1840s. You might also know it if you are someone like Bruce Kennedy. Bruce Kennedy, a documentary filmmaker living in Asheville, North Carolina, is a direct descendant of one of the leaders of this little-known uprising, a man named Dr. Smith A. Boughton, who is better known, at least in this context, as Big Thunder. You'll see why in a bit. Boughton was Kennedy's third great-grandfather. Kennedy grew up in Troy, New York, and his grandmother lived nearby in the town of Averill Park, near the Boughton ancestral home. As kids, we were marched up to visit my granny, and she told us the story of the rebellion, Kennedy says. Back then, he recalls, it just seemed tiresome. Later on, we began to appreciate it. He's been tracking down original source material and conducting interviews for about 3 years now, in order to portray this forgotten but important event. Doing this story has become an obligation to honor the people who conducted this rebellion, including Big Thunder, Kennedy says. So here's the backstory. When the Dutch settled the valley, the Crown, that's, the British Crown, gave enormous tracts of land to a small group of notables called the Patroons, who had names you've likely heard of, including Van Rensselaer and Vanderbilt. Oh, man. Fuck me. And there's fucking Anderson Cooper. Okay, enough. The land was rented to tenant farmers who paid their debts with crops and other capital. In this semi-feudal but legal arrangement, a few privileged families controlled more than 2 million acres of land from Albany and to Delaware counties, as well as the lives of about 300,000 people. Feudalism was declared illegal in New York State in 1782, but the practice continued. After the War for Independence, many farmers found themselves still beholden to these old aristocracies. The farmer paid all taxes, while the landowner paid nothing. The farmer had no right to buy the land, even though in many cases the landlord did not have legal title to the land they were renting out. What the fuck? They could be evicted for failure to pay rent, even if they had enough personal property to cover the debt. And in the 1830s, they began to wonder why they or their ancestors had fought for self-governance fucking 50 years earlier. I added the swear, only to be held under the same yoke of another European master. Fucking what the fuck? According to an 1880 history of Delaware County, quote, one who remembers the old times tells us he never seriously rebelled against the system under which he lived until its seeming injustice suddenly broke him after he had called to pay his rent to the representative of the Hardenberg estate and found him living near New York in what appeared to be an extravagant splendor on the proceeds of the tenant's toil among the mountains of Delaware County. Income inequality. Stephen von Rensselaer III, who was still listed among the 10 richest men in history, had just recently died. His sons, including Stephen von Rensselaer IV, tried to collect back rents. But while the father, known as the Good Patroon, was a more pleasant man, Kennedy says, the sons were spoiled brats. When the farmers asked to meet with Stephen Rensselaer IV about forgiving the debts, he refused and sent his minions to tell them to write up their grievances. What a prick, huh? On the intentionally chosen date of July 4th, in 1839, some of these tenant farmers met in Bern, one of the hill towns, to plan their fight for economic freedom and justice. They issued their own Declaration of Independence, which in part read, "We have counted the cost of such a contest, and we find nothing as dreadful as voluntary slavery. We will take up the ball of the revolution where our fathers stopped it and roll it to the final consummation of freedom and independence of the masses." Fucking dope. Awesome. Stephen von Rensselaer IV responded pretty much as King George III did. He ignored their demands and sent local sheriffs in to collect. Oh, see, that's exactly one of the fucking tenets that Michael Parenti says about the police, is that, like, they are there to work on behalf of protecting private property, right? They refused, and the anti-rent wars were on. They would last for more than a decade, and though Kennedy says it wasn't war, it was popular rebellion, people still suffered and died for their cause. This early phase is known as the Helderberg Wars, for the mountains that overlook the Albany hill towns, but the rebellion spread throughout the Hudson Valley. Boughton was selected by the farmers to represent them in the legislature and in front of the judiciary, all the normal ways, of course, to approach the problem within the law. But then, as now, the corridors of power were hopelessly gridlocked. So Boughton and his co-conspirators decided to try illegal civil disobedience until it was resolved. Inspired by the Boston Tea Party, the farmers disguised themselves as the Calico Indians, with costumes made from their wives' calico dresses and sheepskin masks, and they took names like Big Lion, Black Hawk, Red Wing, Pompey, Thunderbolt, and yes, Big Thunder. I will say here that that's just, quite a lot of appropriation, but we're just discussing the history here. They would sound tin dinner horns, and the, quote, Indians would gather to meet, disrupt property sales, resist evictions, tar and feather opponents, and cause other acts of mayhem. Fucking awesome. In January 1845, 150 delegates from 11 counties met at St. Paul's Lutheran Church in Bern to call for political action. Now, I'm going to disagree with the writer here, but I'll let you decide what I'm disagreeing with. In August 1845, though, things got out of hand. A Delaware County sheriff named Osmond Steele was shot and killed at a farm sale. That got people's attention. Governor Silas Wright declared Delaware County in a state of insurrection. The leaders were charged with riot, conspiracy, and robbery. 2 were sentenced to hang, but their sentences were commuted. One defendant, Big Thunder Boughton, was sentenced to life in prison. It took several more years for things to shake out, but eventually, the feudal system broke down. In 1845, tired of the hassles, many large landowners agreed to sell out, including Stephen von Rensselaer IV, who agreed to sell his rights to the Helderbergs. In 1848, his brother William sold out his rights to more than 500 farms in the East Manor of Rensselaer County. There's a fucking county named after these fucking Fauntleroys. In the 1850s, the remaining Van Rensselaer leases were sold. The state legislature, which until that point had done nothing, was forced to act. An anti-rent political party formed and helped elect candidates favorable to their positions, and with newfound political clout, they changed the laws. Some of these progressive anti-renters even moved out to the Midwest, where, in 1854, they were instrumental in organizing the Republican Party. And when John Young, a big supporter of the anti-renters, was elected the governor of New York in 1847, he pardoned Big Thunder Boughton. How fucking cool is that? All in all, a great story. So why has it been mostly forgotten? Probably because a fucking sheriff was killed. Kennedy thinks that the participants felt what they had done was dishonorable. 4 sheriffs were killed and 400 people in Delaware County were put in prison for months. Okay. I think people felt shame that they broke the law and killed the sheriff, he said. Okay. I talked to a historian who knew a woman who, as a kid, found an outrageous Indian costume at her grandmother's house. The grandmother told her, "You put that away and you never talk about it again." I mean, for reasons of horrible, cultural appropriation and impersonation. I will agree with that part. Yet today, with the same issues of class and income inequality simmering, I wouldn't say they're simmering, bro, he feels the story is more relevant than ever. The remarkable irony to me is that many extremely conservative people are great fans of the rebellion, but when I try to connect it to a rebellion against the elites of the time, they refuse to see how it relates today. They just want to leave the history back there. I mean, it's so... Again, Okay, let's just finish this article. The lesson for the rest of us, he says, is that what those people did then, that looks like democracy to me. As our rights are being restricted, as they were in that era, direct action is something that we all have to routinely engage in. It's not comfortable, and we would rather not, but the only way that we keep this thing called democracy going is by direct action. I believe taking to the streets is the only way that people can get democracy. The name of his film, by the way, is Righteous Rebellion. So again, obviously there's a lens through which we're learning about this, but I think let's just say the actions speak for themselves. Can we say that? We can say that, right? Very cool, very interesting. Mind-fucking blowing to me that, that's what's so crazy is that, around New York, these names still exist. And these descendants still, fucking Anderson Cooper's mother's maiden name was fucking Vanderbilt. It's insane to me. It's just, so crazy that these people still exist. And now we're watching things happen, there's fucking schools, Amazon schools and shit like that. There's all these nouveau fucking Gilded Age things that are happening around us. And it's as if we've learned nothing. And that's why I think it's very important to look at history and see that there were some very cool things that people did in the past. In fact, it's reminding me, October of last year, where the eviction court, Brooklyn Housing Court, was vandalized. I'm just reading here from the Brooklyn paper. It says, a group of activists use a bike lock to close off access to Brooklyn's housing court, which the vandals also covered in anti-eviction graffiti on Friday morning, according to the police. Shortly after authorities discovered the spray-painted words, eviction equals violence and eat the landlord on the exterior of the locked-up courthouse, a declaration circulated on social media coming from the, quote, people of New York that claimed credit for the mischief, saying they were evicting the housing court from its Livingston Street location. Again, direct action works. This works. It disrupts the process that is designed to harm the working class. So again, whether or not you agree with the stuff that happened back there in the fucking 1800s, I'll leave that up to you. But I think that there was some interesting things to learn about that. I think on that high note, let's end it here. I've got a few other things that we could have gone through, but on that high note, let's just leave it here. I really appreciate everybody joining us for another, fucking vintage thing of Dwight's Bites here. I hope it wasn't too yelly or whatever. My wall certainly was, upset by it, but I'll make amends once I stop recording. Again, thank you for everybody for allowing us a little bit of reprieve. Again, thank you for everybody that's listening and interested in all this sort of stuff, because it's certainly not worth doing without all of your participation. I hope everybody's having a wonderful summer that isn't so bogged down with climate anxiety and being evicted or being in medical debt or being in student debt or being under the threat of not being able to see your family members or feeling isolated because your mental health is taking a toll because you can't see your friends because the federal government is bungling the fucking response to the goddamn coronavirus. Anyway, aside from all those things, stay cool.